So this is a good episode.
I'm excited.
Okay, I'm gonna choose your own adventure
Okay,
here,
I love
Carlos.
adventures and
We have 4 different groups that this episode follows.
okay.
And instead of like jumping around between them, we'll go through each of them.
Okay. I love
So
that.
we've got the rebels on Aldhani doing their thing, getting
Yes.
ready. We have the ISB HQ. We meet Dedra.
Yes.
We have Coruscant with Luthen and Mon Mothma.
Yes.
And Clea.
And
And then we
Clay,
have
which I have
Cyril
like, is
Khan.
this Clay? Am I talking to Clay?
I'm doing my best,
You did a
Clea.
fantastic job. I feel like I
Yes,
wore
I
this.
wanted.
It's a little bit more like rebel rebel wear. I think something Cassian would wear.
It does, genuinely. It's the right Ferrix green.
It's a very screen.
Okay, so where should we begin? Aldhani, ISB, Coruscant, Cyril?
I think we have to start with Luthen convincing Cassian.
Yes, at the beginning.
Yeah.
I love how Luthen is simultaneously like, you're my chosen one, but also, you're bleeding on my floor. Clean it up. He's both at the same time. He's so cold to Andor, but he's also like, I really believe in you. I didn't come for the Imperial Star Path unit. I came for you. What's your reaction to this interaction between Andor and Cassian? Or Andor and Luthen?
Yeah, I think the interaction shows that that Luthen really believes in him and believes that he is going to be instrumental to the rebellion, even though he's, Andor in a way, he's a very imperfect, right? He's a very imperfect person for the rebellion, right? He's not someone who's trained in the in the rebel alliance. He's not an ideologue at all, and what it shows in that interaction is that he understands that, and that's why he seeks him, because he understands that, even though Andor might not be, trained in ideology, he, like many, have been screwed over by the Empire in his day-to-day life, and has suffered and has now a common enemy in after what had happened in the previous episodes. So I think it was like kind of like a bit of like a tough love, and that's how he is, right? And I think it's also maybe a way of him just like as an authority figure, right? He's like, doesn't want he understands that he's dealing with ultimately someone who's a mercenary. So you can't give him you can't show that he's gonna get taken advantage of, right? But he does give him funny choices. He says, if you could just kill me and take the plane. And it's like he's not forcing this decision on him. He wants Andor to make the decision himself and to come to the realization. And I think that his pitch to him was like finding that common enemy, that they both were being screwed by the same people, and that was articulating the reasons why his life was so shitty, why he was on the run, and why he has actually suffered for most of his life. Because I mean, his rebuttal to Luthen is like, I've been, having to survive. Life is, surviving is more important. It's like, well, they're gonna get you sooner or later. You might as well fight them now and make money. And I think spoke to his self-interest ultimately, right? Not just from a big moral perspective. And I think sometimes in politics we get caught up, I think, too much in the moral argument, which it is moral. It comes from moral, but also to identity. And what Luthen is saying is like, hey, your identity is to be us. You are us, and they are against all of us, including you. And you also will be better off economically if you help us pull this off, and it'll screw the empire over. So yeah, I think it was a really masterclass in recruiting someone in a way that he wasn't talking down to. He wasn't also like trying to kiss his ass. It was like, here's the economic and real life situations, and this is how you're able to achieve both. Let out your anger and frustration, and fight for a better future, and at the same time, you'll get paid. and it'll be worth it. And I think that that was a very fascinating way that he was able to convince him and not force the decision on him, and show him that, you know, at any moment he could leave, he could even steal the plane, but it wouldn't get him to his what he really wanted.
Yeah, it's so good that Luthen says, "What are you gonna do? Steal their trinkets, spit in their food for the rest of your
Yeah,
life, or are you gonna fight them for
exactly,
real?"
exactly.
And it's funny that, like, Cassian's recounting of him being 16, fighting for 2 years on Mimban, and Luthen corrects him, and he's like,
Mhm.
"You went there as a cook, and you were there for 6 months." And it's interesting that Cassian rewrote his own history to make himself a fighter, exposing that he really does wanna
He wants
be a
to.
fighter. He sees himself as that, and so I think it's good that Luthen goes through this agitation with him right before saying, you know, it's big stakes. I'll pay you 200K. And you're stealing the quarterly payroll for an entire Imperial sector. And you can tell that Cassian wants to be a part of that. He wants the smoke. You can see it in his eyes. He's like, oh, yeah. And then this classic moment happens, which is so exemplary of what happens all the time in movement work. And we do have the ISB simultaneously talking about how they quash movements. And then you have everyone on Aldhani being so skeptical of Cassian coming in. And it's like our first phone call, how we're timid for the first like 10 minutes, like sussing each other out. Like, is this person for real? Is this someone I can trust? I was thinking about that when I was watching this. I was like, oh, this is so good that they show how
Yeah,
skeptical movement people
yeah,
are of someone else coming in. Like, are you FBI? Are you
yeah.
CIA? Are you infiltrating? Are you actually down?
Yeah, and I think that there's good reason, right? Both in, you know, in Star Wars and in real life. I mean, you had COINTELPRO here and movements. I mean, even now, I mean, the infiltration that happens. So like, it's understandable. Um, and also just like ultimately, you know, when they go to Aldani, something that popped in my head immediately when the group is like, we're literally 3 days out from the heist, and you know, including someone, even if they didn't even if they believe that he did believe in the cause, it's like, well, you're gonna accidentally screw, you know, like hurt the mission because we've already been working on this for a long time. And that's kind of like the territorial thing that happens in politics and in movement, right? It's like we've been doing the work for a really long time. You're gonna come in and like, you know, save us or screw us, and you're not prepared. And but also that's the nature of ragtag movements and campaigns and etc. It's like, yeah, you just have to adapt, and you know, you take the help that you can get. But yeah, I think the sussing each other out and then ultimately, you know, letting your walls down once you connect. And I think that's ultimately, as humans and as people, we want to connect. And it just has to be the way that you know, people interact with each other really come from a place of commonality. And I think that you see that when it works, right? It's like, well, we were both hurting the same way, both agree the same things, we have way more in common. I think we, you know, as humans and in our tribal nature, we're always you know, scared that, you know, someone else is going to come take something from us or they're different from us. I think that ultimately it's about identity. But then once we get to know someone, we're like, oh shit, they actually are more similar than I thought. I think we have way more in common. And I think that's ultimately the fight about politics is a fight about identity. And our goal and our goal should be to show people that our identity is much bigger than one group. Our identity as a collective is people who want to live and in this world and have a just and equitable life and provide for our families, and that the people who, you know, are against that are a small, very powerful, wealthy elite, and it's not each other. And it's about expanding the meaning of identity. And that is what I think a lot of the fight is. And not everyone's going to trust. You know, like someone calls you on the phone saying, I got the best deal for you. This product is gonna change your life. Do you believe them automatically? No, right? You're like, okay, you're telling me amazing things, but I don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same thing, right? You see an ad, I don't trust it. So what makes you trust it? Well, you see it multiple times, right? Maybe you actually level with the person tells you their story, and you find commonalities. But I think ultimately it's about community and connection. Um, it is how we are able to fight what the empire and while this government does very well, which is they want people to not trust each other. My family's from Cuba, and you know, they escaped the dictatorship there. My grandfather was a political prisoner under Castro. And my great grandmother fought in the Cuban Revolution against the dictator Batista before Castro, with the revolution that Castro had led, right? And what my family has told me, and what is that no one trusts each other when there's a dictatorship, because people are always scared that someone is going to go tell the government that you have said something anti government, and that is where that nihilism, that lack of community is where authoritarian governments thrive. So being able to bridge that fear and connect in community is literally the most powerful way that we're able to defeat those forces. And I think that ultimately that's what we saw in the episode, is that even though they didn't really trust him, eventually they're like, all right, fine. And even I think, Cassian, he wasn't even sure that this was possible. He's like, this is crazy, this is a suicide mission. But ultimately he saw the commitment of the people, and the people saw that he was committed, and they're like, all right, let's get to work. And I think what also influenced Cassian is just how much Luthen believed in this, and believed in him, and believed in what they were doing. And I think Cassian, as you had said, he wanted to fight these people. He had been searching for a purpose, for a meaning, but someone needed to articulate it to him. And that's what I think Luthen did in the mission in Aldhani was going to do.
And Luthen, says to Val, you want to be a leader. This is what it means to lead. Go do it. Go tell them that this was the plan all along. And she's facing all of these questions from everyone else, Skeen and Tarman. Nemec seems happy to have a pilot on board. He's already thought it through. He's like, we need a pilot to be successful, so this makes sense to me. I'll take him.
Nemec is so sweet. he's like,
we have extra comms. We have enough equipment.
And when Nemec was like, I think he believes in the cause. When like Andor's like totally not like at first literally doesn't like care that much about the cause, is just there for the money and to stick it. And he's like, Nemec's like, yeah, I think he does. And I think that just shows that we need to have we can't let the circumstances take away the hope in people and humanity. And yes, there will be bad people. Yes, you'll be betrayed. That's gonna happen, right? But living scared of betrayal is a life not worth living, and a life that will lead to isolation. When believing in the betterment of people and hoping that humans are good ultimately and mostly good, I think will lead to a more powerful force to actually stop the bad forces in the country and in the galaxy. But I think what was also fascinating is Vel. She argued so strongly against Luthen, but then she's like, as soon as she's the leader, she like fought to the end. I was thinking in my head, it's like Luthen. I wonder if Luthen was like a bit paranoid that she would cave and tell the other rebels, like, actually I'm just doing this because he's gonna get paid. She was like, no, she defended him. It's like, he's part of the mission, he's part of the movement. And that is the discipline that also you need, right? In a movement, in a dedicated movement, is that you need to. It is ultimately a fight, and we need to be able to disagree. But then when we need to be organized and fight, we need to be very disciplined and organized. And I think that's the other thing, is that she was getting everyone in line, because or else everyone would die, right, in the mission if it's not executed properly, because there was so much at stake. So I think this is so fascinating dynamics that you do see in politics and in organizing, to see it play out in a show, because ultimately, no matter how big and important thing is, we're still people. There's still going to be friction, there's still going to be disagreements, and sometimes I think about that. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, things are so bad right now. Why are we fighting and bickering? But that's the process, and we have to. That's just reality. We're humans at the end of the day, and we don't easily trust. But then once we do trust, we're very highly community oriented people, so we can achieve incredible things. But I think that dynamic was very fascinating for sure, and I think that a lot of very relevant too.
And mirrors our first interaction between Mon Mothma and Luthen, where Mon Mothma's like, I found someone else to give the funding. You need funding. And Luthen pushes back. We can't bring someone else into the circle. And Mon Mothma's like, you don't have a choice. I'm bringing this person into the circle because we need money.
Yeah.
And so the same position Luthen just put Val in, he's put
He's
in
put
by
that
Senator
was
Mothma.
yes. Oh yeah, you're 100% right. And I noticed it, and I was like, he's literally says he still needs the money, right? But he's like
Mhm.
scared. And then I think when Mon Mothma says like, I have way more to like, I would be the first one to fall, like, and I think that showed that. I think both in the interaction with Luthen and Cassian, and then Mon Mothma and Luthen, it's like they're both showing that they're committed and that this is right by putting their own skin in the game, right? Like their opponent's like, well, I'm risking myself. We're both risking, and I think that shared risk, connects them both and convinces the other person. Um, and also with Val, right? It's like Luthen is making a huge risk, right? A huge risk because this is a huge mission for the rebellion. If Cassian fucks it up, like that's gonna really uh, affect his entire cause. So he's also taking the risk. Yeah, it's everyone's showing the risk that they're taking as just to convince the other about the trusting their tactics. I think is a very cool dynamic to see, and that they bond and trust each other because of that. To show that they'd all go down. If one goes down, they'd all go down together. So everyone has to just, and there's also a level of risk that has to be accepted. I think that's the other
Mhm.
part. And Luthen accepts it. Val accepts it.
Mon
Cassian
Mothma accepts it. She
Mon
lives with a
Mothma.
constant implant. Her driver, she thinks, is ISB
Her
or
driver and her
something.
husband. I feel like that's a very
He's the
fascinating.
worst. Yeah, that's such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Let's get into that because the Gorman element, we haven't been in Gorman yet, no spoilers, but immediately sounds like, to me, Israel Palestine when she's like, oh, these people work to undo everything I get done in the Senate. These are not my friends. Why would you invite them to this party? And he's like, well, they're fun. So you're seated away with the boring ones. And she says, oh, we should sit someone from Gorman near there. They just blocked their shipping lanes. They're going to starve. And
Yeah.
still, it's like he has this mindset that a lot of people that are apolitical do, which is to be friends with people with horrible incentives in politics, because they think talking about politics is boring and you're such a pessimistic downer talking about what's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that these two are in a marriage.
Yeah, and I think that in a way also he does it to get under her skin.
Yeah.
I think that's how I felt too. Is that uh, they clearly are not in it. It's not a good relationship, and he is undermining her on a personal level as well. And doesn't, yeah, I think doesn't really respect her, and doesn't understand her either. And yeah, and I think that the people that he's inviting are people who are like have just like power to hurt people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could say that that is also indicative of what happens in politics. Right now, how can you tell someone that the Trump administration is fascist and really terrible, and then go and vote for their appointments and operate as business as usual, right? And that's why a lot of people are losing faith, have lost faith in the leadership of the party. They see legislative leaders say Trump is the worst thing on earth, which he is, but then they go and they just treat things like we were in the 90s, not as an
Mm.
emergency. And I think that's why what the Texas Democrats did for redistricting, that's how you fight. That's what inspired people. Yeah, they left the state to deny quorum. They didn't act like things are normal. And as someone myself was, worked in local politics, I see this is a normal thing where people from factions that hate each other and they fight, and they all will hang out and party together later on. And it always makes you feel a little like weird. It's like, why is everyone just acting like nothing? There's real things on the line, and these are people who are actively involved, right? I do separate people who are not in politics, who might hold certain views, from leaders. I think that people who, might be, let's say, Republicans, or might hold another view, I think that these are people that we can convince to our side, even a little bit,
Mm.
because ultimately we need to do that. I think that is different from actual like hanging out with, members of this administration and like partying like nothing when they are actively, um, not only are they using their rhetoric to convince the average, everyday person that what they're doing is right and brainwashing them, but then they're directly making decisions that harm. And I think that there is a difference there, and I think that that's where people don't take seriously when people in the media say this is terrible, and then they see them partying or hanging out or just treating the legislative process like it's normal, and voting for ICE funding and DHA's funding, right? And it's like you can't. People won't take you seriously in the urgency. You have to show the public that there's an urgency, and I think that scene has a lot of similarities with the politics that we're living through right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of families with this dynamic, right? Where someone's a Trump supporter. I've heard stories about this where the memorabilia is all up on the walls and the flags are flying for Trump, and they're having their very liberal, very politically involved family over. And it's almost like a dynamic of resentment within a family to like weaponize the political beliefs that are going to piss them off. It's not really about politics, just
Always,
like this interaction.
it's about
It's
the
the resentment in the relationship. Yeah.
agree. It's the
And but politics is being used to exacerbate it.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
Yes, I think that happens a lot. I mean, if you want to piss off someone in your family at Thanksgiving dinner, like Cuban Americans have a very complicated relationship with politics, and
Mm-hmm.
I grew up hearing a lot about communism and dictatorship and how terrible both are. And then, I grew up realizing that, in America, which is supposed to be this amazing free country, people are screwed over by this economic elite. So,
Mm.
uh, and I'm very against dictatorship, and obviously, I mean against any authoritarian system, right? Communism in Cuba is an authoritarian system, but it's used to just, in especially in Florida, Cuban American culture, to just suppress any sort of like progressive or left leaning idea. And what's interesting is that the Cuban American community has way more Democrats than people realize, but they're quiet. They don't speak about their views because you're immediately called a communist. You're immediately called um, a terrible person, right? A rat. All these things. Um, because it's so emotional. It's such an emotional reaction, and there's many communities like that have that difficult that dynamic. But the younger generation of Cubans is changing, and I have been very outspoken about this, and I've received a lot of comments like, yes, I agree. Like it's not Cuban communism to just support Bernie Sanders or to support Zohran Mamdani, or to just believe in the healthcare, right, and basic human rights. And it's Trump that's most similar to the dictate, like how Castro was as a dictator. That's way more similar than anything else. Um, and also, I mean, there's the dynamic watching the episode about the Gormans being their supply lines getting cut off. I actually thought immediately about Cuba right now,
Mm.
which is a very difficult subject as someone who has a lot of family there. I visited Cuba in last July, and it was a very eye-opening experience, and I saw a lot of suffering, a lot of hopelessness. Yet Cubans are just naturally such joyous and kind people at the same time. Um, and it's very rough, because the government there is horrible, and then the U.S. government is being very horrible to them. So the
Mm-hmm.
Cuban people have both governments against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see the embargo become something celebrities are now talking about. Like Camila Cabello is releasing statements. People are responding to
Yeah,
Camila Cabello. We're in this moment where our politics are crossing over with popular culture on such a common basis. But I think we've had the problem of wanting everything to be black and white when so much of it is gray. Like the Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua had this 40-year anniversary meeting at Brown when I was working with Stephen Kinzer, where like literally it was in a classroom where they brought former Contras and former
Wait, they
Sandinistas
bought
together.
that's crazy. Wow.
Yep. And everyone's in a room, including the United States ambassador to Nicaragua at the time, the woman who took the famous photograph of like the guy throwing the Molotov cocktail. She was there. So many, like Stephen was a foreign correspondent in Nicaragua at the time, Stephen Kinzer. And so everyone talking about a revolution and what went wrong. And like Contra's genuinely saying, we should have never worked with the Reagan administration or purchased weapons through Iran, just openly apologizing to Sandinistas, saying it was completely wrong to do that, and Sandinistas saying we should not have burned the indigenous land and the trees, and Armstrong Wiggins, the representative from the indigenous group, saying we would have taught you how to live off of the land, but instead you wanted to control us and have absolute rule because you were so afraid of the CIA and the United States coming in and coupping us that you wanted to establish absolute control. And so the blame is just so shared, and it was so
Wow, that
fascinating.
is quite frankly, like sounds like one of the most fascinating conversations to be, listen to and just be a fly on the wall on.
There's a lot of like media that was made that came out of it that just people don't know exists, I think. But I can send
Please
you some
do.
stuff if you want to
Please
listen to
do.
it. But I was leaving grad school as this like excited young socialist about to work for the Bernie campaign. And I went to this and I was like, yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than I'd like for it to be. You know, I'm like, let's have our own Sandinista
Yeah.
revolution. And it's like, well, what if the FBI ruins it? Or what if the Democratic Party
Yeah.
ruins it?
Yeah, the Cuba
You know?
situation is very nuanced, and it's hard because it's also very, very personal. Growing up, I have family that is directly affected, right, has been directed by the embargo. Um, my position has always been that the embargo has not worked in over 60 years. It's only hurt the
Mm,
people, and like Einstein said that the definition of insanity is to try the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Also, I saw some
mm-hmm,
reporting that apparently um, the Trump administration is having conversations with Castro's nephew as a
mm,
possible. They want to do the same thing they did in Venezuela, which like it's not like the U.S. restored freedom to Venezuela. They just kept the same government in charge, but doing what they want in terms of the oil. Um, and my, I mean, the Cuban government has to go. I mean, it's a horrible dictatorship. Like it is. It does not mean that I support the U.S. Just coming in and pillaging the country, but at the same time, like it is a horrible, horrible government. People have like no base, like everyone's to leave, and this is why I think that the Trump administration thinks that they're just going to starve the people. As the people are already starving, like that's first off. People just want to leave, so you're just going to see people flee, which is what you're seeing. Young people that I spoke to in Cuba, they just want to literally go to Eastern Europe because they can't come to the and just like leave and then find themselves like that. There is no, from what I heard, um, the situation is so bad that people just want to leave. And I think that this accelerationist theory, which is in both sides of the political spectrum, I think the United States
mm.
foreign policy thinks that this accelerationism would work. Who knows? Well, I do know is that people will die ultimately from starvation, and that's for certain. And I think sometimes like the left that like was like, oh, I remember in 2016, it's like we're gonna let, or 2020, we're gonna let Trump win, and then like that's gonna spark enough of people into the left. I'm like, no, I really don't believe in letting the horrible things happen in accelerationism because things can just get worse and worse. And I think in Cuba we can see is a lot of people die. Um, there's so many people. Like the poverty level is insane. I saw people in my own blood, my own family, live in just extreme poverty, like no running water kind of level. Um, and what's crazy is that they give whatever they have. Like when there's a guest, like the people will still like offer you their food, and it's the Cuban spirit is incredible. And they're all entrepreneurs trying to sell here and there. I do think Cuba would be an incredible country if it was truly democratic and free from any sort of um, you know, uh, pillaging, without having an imperialist nation control it, or having a government, which they currently have, that controls everything. And there is an elite class in Cuba, which is the the government there. They're the wealthy ones. They're the ones that live well while the rest of the people suffer. Um, I think if Cuba had none of none of the options and actually had like a truly democratic, social democratic government, would the entrepreneur spirit and the uh, of that country and the possibility of Cuba. Cuba's a huge island. It would be an incredible country that would produce so much. So I feel very conflicted, and I feel very like this is like very nuanced and tough position to be in as a Cuban American right now with what's going on.
Yeah, it's like almost watching an abusive parent, Like hitting your kid doesn't make them behave. Starving the people of Cuba doesn't make them want to participate in American hegemony and global free trade. It doesn't make them want to be a part of this new era of the Monroe Doctrine that they keep talking about. And so the Trump administration clearly wants to have control over the entire Western
That's
Hemisphere.
the real motivation, and that's the thing, is that that's the real motivation of Trump. I mean, anyone who thinks Trump cares about human rights, I mean, obviously he doesn't. I mean, in Venezuela, again, doesn't. He just installed their own, Maduro's VP, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. And the mentality has been there for so long. It's okay, it reminds me of what the ISB leader said. Because so many of these decisions come from groups like the ISB. The CIA has been trying to establish control over Latin and Central America for decades. So they're talking about what security means and how to establish security. And that's really what Rubio and Trump and all of these guys in the administration, Hegseth, talk about too. Oh, we're fighting for the security of the American people and the safety of the American people. But, he says to his room of lieutenants, why are we here? Why does the ISB exist? And Dedra says the official mission of the ISB, we're here to further security objectives by collecting intelligence, providing useful analysis, and conducting effective covert actions, sir. And he says, very good, Dedra, that's verbatim from the ISB mission statement, and wrong. Security is an illusion. You want security, call the Navy, launch a regiment of troopers. We are healthcare providers. We treat sickness, we identify symptoms, we locate germs, whether they arise from within or have come from the outside. The longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat the disease. So this is really how empires work. The security is not about keeping people safe. It's about quashing any discontent or counterexamples to how they think government should happen.
I literally wrote this down. I was gonna. I'm like, I gotta talk about this.
Yeah.
100%. That scene was fascinating, and I think that's part of I don't know if we can talk about Nemec's. I know it's further on Nemec's manifesto, but there is a line from it that he says, "Oppression is the mask of fear." Right, and it's their fear of losing control that creates that oppression. And yeah, I think saying that we're in the healthcare, like, of identifying, right, because ultimately power can only be enforced, right, through violence in that way, right, from an imperial perspective or an authoritarian government perspective, since they don't really have the will of the people. And that means that any sort, whether small or big, of act of defiance is an existential threat to the empire and to their power and to an authoritarian government. So they need to identify it before it happens, which is why getting people to tell on each other, getting people to report each other, creating that culture of fear is essential, because it is ultimately an illusion. Because if people unite and say enough of this, they do not have the power, they do not have the ability to stop everyone. But that if they're able to suppress when it happens, and people will be more scared, it's all operates on fear. I think ultimately there's this meme. I don't know if you've seen of this. Like, it's this donkey tied to a cone, just like a traffic cone, and the donkey just doesn't move. He has a rope on the cone, as the donkey thinks that it can't move, and it's like that's literally what authoritarian governments and what the empire, what keeps it is that the people are scared. They think that they are tied down, and they need to do everything they can to reinforce that illusion. And once people start challenging it everywhere, they will be overwhelmed. That no government on this planet uh, can fully be able to stop an out rebellion from every single angle. So they need to identify, and they need to spy, and they need to get ahead of any little act of rebellion, which is why anything small, right? The German can germinate into something a big rebellion, because if people see that the empire can be defeated in any way, right? Which is why guerrilla movements and movements against empires and just ragtag groups that have defeated mighty forces, they don't go to the heart of the empire. They don't go attack in the capital. What do they go? They go raid an outpost, right? Because it is a what you want is actually a moral victory, right? If the people think that they are not invincible, then more people will be willing to defy, right, the authority, until it floods the banks of the empire, as in the manifesto, and they cannot respond. And with any popular movement, I think directly tying it to where we're living here in this administration in the United States, um, for a lot of last year, we saw. I mean, you saw law firms cave, you saw corporations cave to Trump and his demands, giving them, on the law firm side, free legal representation. You saw so many companies just like cave, decide to not criticize him at all, and it was all an illusion. And it was because, oh, since he won, and won the popular vote by not that big of a margin either, but he won it. Everyone's just like, okay, let's just give him everything. And that was so cowardly. And we are where we are now with the resistance
Mm.
that people have put up, because there were people who said hell no, and because people resisted when it wasn't very popular to resist, when it wasn't socially acceptable. For a lot of last year, it wasn't socially acceptable to resist, and people faced huge consequences. I mean, look at the people who, after Charlie Kirk's assassination, people who just posted Charlie Kirk's own words were fired from their jobs, were investigated. The FBI was investigating people. Pam Bondi said that they were going to investigate people. Visas were taken away by Marco Rubio. I mean, like, it was a scary time to speak out, which is why it is so important that when it is the hardest that people do, because it's a domino effect. It is permission structures. Um, my friend Charles McBride, who I was hung out in LA with, and recently, and we were on the panel. He also a huge fan of Andor. We in the panel we're talking about the permission structures. How, like, literally, it doesn't matter how involved or not involved you are. It doesn't matter how many followers you have on social media. It doesn't matter how many friends you have and family. Just literally speaking up, whether it's with friends or sharing your opposition towards what's happening, creates a permission structure to people who feel that way but are scared of might be scared and just need to see someone fighting, which is why leaders are so important, which is why it's been so disappointing at the lack of fight in the leaders of right now, the opposition, in terms of the in Congress, because that inspires people. That means, like, well, if they're fighting, they're putting, I could do it too, right? And I think that ultimately, we're all leaders in our community. We all have friends and family that will take what we say seriously, and even if they don't fully take seriously, it will make them think. And we need to make people think that they shouldn't be scared to defy this government. And if enough people think that, this government loses its power. And we're seeing it. I mean, it's so devastating and horrible that we had the two Americans lost their lives, and Renee Good and Alex Preddy, may their souls rest in peace. But they defied the government. They put their lives on the line, and they paid the ultimate price. But the people responded in droves. They People did not accept it. They did not accept the abuses of this government. And the resistance in Minneapolis has been an inspiration for many. And the resistance that has helped also inspire elected officials, You know, everyone needs inspiration. If anything, elected officials take inspiration from people and force them to actually fight harder. And even those who are allies, even those in positions of power, like Mon Mothma can only do so much, right? Like if the empire is really strong, she can't do much. But when the empire is weakening, she can do more. So it's an inside outside. It is in everyone, and really uniting under the common theme of basic human rights and freedom. And freedom is that pure idea, truly, that cannot be arrested, it cannot be killed. And one quote that I love a lot by, I believe it's Paulo Coelho, but Lula says it a lot, and it's, they can kill one, two, or three roses, but they can never stop the coming of spring. And I think all of us right now, we are the coming of spring.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think the what happens on Ferrix is so similar to what happened in Minneapolis. You have someone shot in broad daylight, and the community was already
Hmm.
resisting these, corpos coming in the way they did, as if they're in a war zone, just looking for Cassian. And they're all fed up with Cassian, but they fight the corpos anyway. But not to an extreme degree until they shoot someone in broad daylight. And the processing of this event in Coruscant, in the headquarters, there's no mentioning that they killed someone before they had this property damage and lost their own lives. They only say, we have lives lost and property damage. And Cyril and Dedra taking it so seriously and saying, no, they had Imperial technology. This could be the beginning of anti-imperialist activities. There's a pattern here. It's like Cyril and Dedra have this intuition that Andor is the crux of a rebellion. And I don't think we talk about human intuition enough, because they could just be overzealous
Yeah.
fascist assholes, right? Or they could be people with actual intuition that see a little
Yeah.
glimmer of what's going on that they can't explain. And she does say gut
Yeah.
feeling as a reason for why she thinks she
And I
should
think
take
that
this on.
dynamic is so fascinating too, because the way that I kind of seen Episode 4 is like we have this like kind of corporate boardroom as the Empire, right? Where things are just numbers, things are
Mm.
just these people are trying to climb the ladder, right? And when Dendra challenges the other guy because of the jurisdiction, and he's like, "Don't shake the ladder before you climb it." For them it's like just this, go to work and make decisions and try to get ahead in your career, when like the rebels are literally fighting, like risking their entire lives and livelihoods for a cause in a vision. But I think Dedra doesn't care, so I think she does care about climbing the ladder, but she is smarter than most of the people there, who, because she's told, like, just, know your place, like, don't rock the boat. It's interesting because even in these, and this is how empires and authoritarian governments is, even with their overzealousness that they act, they are ultimately, they get lazy. Every power structure,
Mm.
once they achieve power, they get lazy, they get complacent. And then they only react hard when something happens, when it's too late. And that is where a ragtag, rebel forces have an advantage, because much like a startup going up against a huge company that's already established, right? The huge company has so many protocols and bureaucracy that they have to go through, so they don't innovate as much. A startup needs innovation for its survival. They don't have the ability. They need to try new things, right? Um, and I think that is why, like, the Empire headquarters don't take very seriously Dedra and Cyril, and actually punish, right? Cyril gets punished. They punish, like, Dedra gets also, punished and made to feel. Um, and as evil as they were, they had a vision. They were She's newer, right, to that structure. And she came at it from the perspective of, I think what's interesting, I think Dedra and Cyril, as evil as they are, I think that they believe in a cause, and they actually believe in the cause of the empire, right? I think that they're not your typical bureaucrats that usually,
Mm.
are in charge, that get lazy and get because it's fascinating, because why wouldn't the empire want some people who are doing job very well in identifying possible rebels. Why? Because if it's a false alarm, then that means that they're wasting money, they're wasting resources. Also, why are you trying to
Mm-hmm.
get ahead? You're trying to be the center of attention. Um, those are the dynamics that, when we're fighting this authoritarian government in America, we have to realize that they're not that competent, and we know that we're not very but like they're not all powerful because they themselves mess up. They've blinked, and that's why the empire in Andor, does respond so harshly to any sort of rebel activity once they really understand it's rebel activity, right? And just in general, fascist governments like in Nazi Germany, like they were so systematic. My belief is that I do believe that Trump wants to install a Nazi style Germany in America. However, we are not the Weimar Republic in 1930s. I think
Mm-hmm.
America, with the structure that we have with 50 states, with the fact that everyone has guns, with the fact that people have been so used to for 250 years to freedom of speech and self determination. I don't think that and we've shown it is as easy as they thought it would be. They have gone very far along, more than we would have ever thought under normal circumstances. But if we're purely looking at this from a dictatorship, right? The Trump administration has blinked. Like they have had to retreat. And then retreat is when you keep forward. That's what should show us. And we should have so much hope that they are vulnerable. They are weaker than we think. And they're Trump's bravado and on the administration's, propaganda to project strength is an admission of weakness. It's an admission that they lost. They lost the fight in Minneapolis. They lost it. They had to retreat. This doesn't happen in pure fascism, right? They never
Mm-hmm.
retreat. They never blink, and they did. And that's the biggest mistake they could have made. And it's because they don't have the full power that they would want to, and which is why now is the essential moment for us to rise even higher, to not just see, all right, great, we got them out of Minneapolis, our work is done. No, no, now we press on harder, right? Because there is weakness, there is vulnerability. We must organize more resistance. We must make sure that the midterms are too big. We vote in such numbers are too big to rig because they're going to try different things. They're going to try things. So our role and our mission is to organize that anger, and I think that's what the rebels in Andor do. They're really working to organize it, but they're trying to strike the empire, and I think that's what they're trying to do in Aldhani. It's like they're trying to rob the what is it, the Imperial sector payroll, but it's because that would be a blow that would be heard across the galaxy. In a way, in this episode, the Rebel Alliance isn't really that big or strong yet, but they know that if they do something, they could put them on the map and show the empire can be struck. That will create a swell of rebellion that they don't even need to control, that will
Mm-hmm.
spark.
Yeah, in Minneapolis, it also wasn't like I wouldn't credit Tim Walz as the reason their occupation fell
No.
apart. I would credit people who were scrappy, who were like guerrilla organizing against ICE, who had intricate systems of resistance and warning whenever ICE was coming to a neighborhood. And there's a reason we're not seeing what they're still doing to resist occupation. It's pretty clear that our algorithms have been constructed and adjusted in a way that we're not seeing what's still going on because they don't want us to have the playbook. But I think we've seen enough, and there's enough sharing, and there's enough people in cities across the United States where Trump might try this again that look at what happened in Minneapolis and how it was resisted and how they organized against ICE, that it's
Hmm.
it's replicable now.
And
And I think that they were trying to do a 1930s Germany, but I think because people stood up and said, "No, you can't. We'll stop you, and we'll put our lives on the line to stop you,"
um,
that
and
is what made them
I
fail.
agree, and I was thinking about this last night about how Alex Priddy and Renee Good were not these like political leaders. Uh, they weren't these people who were
No.
organized, political movement organizers for years and years. These were everyday people who were like, "This is horrible, and I'm going to do something. I'm going to film these people. I'm going to be a part of the resistance." And I think um, that is how a real rebellion happens, is that when everyday people are are sick and tired and then feel like there's a way to get involved. And I think that the credit to the organizers who were able to create these systems of identifying when ICE was there, et cetera, and that resistance that made it impossible for ICE to operate. And what's incredible is how they kept it nonviolent. Like how the organizers in Minneapolis kept it nonviolence. The violence came purely from ICE. And that showed
Mm.
the average person that maybe had never been to a protest that, holy shit, this is so wrong, right? And we're able to get more people
Mm-hmm.
involved, and everyday people were so outraged, and then the political ramifications because they were so disciplined and they were so everyday people. This wasn't, this wasn't these political organizers who were the ones who unfortunately were killed. It was like everyday Americans that um, were horrified about the situation. But there's a lot of lessons to be learned in what happened in Minneapolis and the community, that people were just defending their neighbors. Um, and I do believe the community is the antidote to fascism and authoritarianism. It really is.
That's beautiful. That's a good thought to end on. Anything else that you want to say about episode 4?
Well, anything else is that I think that I feel very lucky that this was the episode that we talked about the beginnings of the rebellion, and it's that things seem
Mm-hmm.
impossible until they happen. And in this episode, the rebellion is just starting, but they have a big dream and a big vision of stopping and taking down the empire. And even though the size of the empire, I mean, the empire has incredible wealth and power all across the galaxy, and this ragtag people believe that they can take it on. um, they believed. And I think my final message is believe. We have the power to do so much if we just realize that we're unstoppable once we understand that united, there's literally nothing we can do. So, great lessons.
Well said, Carlos.
Thank you.
Beautiful stuff, really. Thanks for joining the Andor Rebellion
Well, and thank you
project.
for putting this amazing series together. This is so cool. I've told so many of my friends about what you're doing, and I think in these really difficult times, art really does inspire us, and these stories. And even though it's a fictional story, it is so real at the same time, and it's a great blueprint. And thank you. I think that you are inspiring a lot of people, and I think doing this show and having more people watch Andor and connect it to real life will help move our lines forward.
Yeah, it's been fun. I just want everyone to watch Andor, but yeah, it's given a little bit of revolutionary community
Absolutely, it's a
for
great,
everybody.
amazing show. Amazing,
It's been good times.
all
All
right,
right,
Jessica.
Carlos. Thank you. We'll see you at
Jessica or Clea?
Disrupt. Clea, please.